Hi everyone, we'll just wait another minute or two for everyone to log into the webinar and then we'll get started. So we might kick off now. I just wanted to say good afternoon to everyone that's joined us today and thank you for coming to the final webinar hosted by the FAAA. It's our series of 3 webinars that we've had this year and it's focused around the professional year for financial planning students. So our webinar today is going to cover what to expect after you've completed the financial advisor exam, including what we cover in Q3 and Q4, along with some tips and tricks on how to get the most out of your professional year and how to move forward into your future role as a fully registered financial advisor. My name is Kim Harrison and I'll be hosting and presenting today along with my colleague Kira Sharrock and our esteemed panelist Jacob Eliopoulos, who was the FAAA Student of the Year in 2023. A bit about me so far. I currently sit on the FAAA Emerging Professional Committee as a committee member, and I completed my professional year in December 2023 after sitting the financial advisor exam in February 2023. So I have definitely been through it with these guys as well. I'm currently a financial advisor for a company called Sufficient Funds, and our focus is generally on clients who are aged between 25 and 50 to achieve their life and their financial goals and make sure that they're living their best lives. And I'll now like to pass over to Kira, my co-presenter, who's going to give a bit of a background on her role and experience as well before we get started.
Thanks, Kim. So hi, everyone. My name's Kira Sharrock. I work at a self-licensed business called Bravium, based in Canberra. I've worked in financial planning for a very long time, more years than I care to count. But it took me a long time to decide that I wanted to pursue that path of becoming an advisor. Completed my professional year in October last year after having sat the advisor exam in July the year before that. So a full 12 months between the exam and actually finishing. That's all from me for now. Jacob, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yes, my name's Jacob Eliopoulos. I am a current member of the FAAA and have been in the industry since about 2021 now. I'm currently working for the Hopkins Group, so we're based out of the CBD here in the great state of Melbourne. And I've been at the Hopkins Group now for 2 years. Previously, I was a client service manager, and now I'm in the third quarter of my professional year. I have just completed the exam and now obviously going into quarter 3 and 4, hoping to be fully registered and a qualified advisor.
Awesome. Thanks, Jacob. Now, before we move on, I would also just like to thank the FAAA for supporting us to host the webinar series. And for anyone that's not so familiar with the FAAA, it's our leading body for the financial advice profession. And basically what it means is that they advocate and they represent the interests for their members, which hopefully will be all of you guys one day. And there's a number of membership options as well and opportunities for students and emerging professionals who are just starting out in the industry, which we'll jump into a bit later on in the webinar. But I'll mention that the student membership is completely free. So feel free to reach out to us, anyone in the webinar, if you've got any questions, or in the chat box if you've got any questions along the way during the webinar as well. And you also may have heard us mention the FAAA Emerging Professionals Committee, which Kira and I currently sit on. Every webinar that we've had in this series has been run by members of the committee. We're all really passionate financial planning professionals, and we just want to create a community of existing students and newly registered advisors to connect and share ideas with. if you're interested in that as well, please reach out. So we'll jump to the next slide. So now we'll get into, I guess, the nuts and bolts of Q3 and Q4 of the professional year. Basically, there's 4 criteria that you need to meet to begin Q3 of the professional year and call yourself a provisional financial advisor. Step 1 is completing the exam. Step 2, you've completed your approved degree. Step 3 is that you've completed the first and second quarter of the professional year, even if you've accelerated, they've both been signed off. And 4, you have been authorized by an AFS licensee to provide personal advice on relevant financial products to retail clients. Now, I will note here that you might be aware that you have the option to accelerate Q1 and Q2 if your licensee and supervisor agree that you meet the criteria. And this could work really well for a person who might work in the industry already for a period of time, like in an associate or a client service or a paraplanning role. But with Q3 and Q4, they can't be accelerated because these are where you're really getting into the client focus based work. And you are still required to meet the 1,600 hours of work and training for the professional year, even if you have accelerated Q1 and Q2. So the difference with Q3 and Q4, as opposed to Q1 and Q2, is that there's an expectation that you're now ready to start engaging with clients with much more limited supervision from your supervisor. Now, this can mean a number of things, which would include liaising and running discussions with clients directly if you're not already, developing financial strategies for your clients, running parts of the client meetings yourself with limited oversight from your supervisor, and preparing the statements of advice for clients. Within these quarters, you'll also be required to touch on 4 ethical dilemmas that you could be confronted with in your role as a financial advisor. And what we're meaning by an ethical dilemma is where a scenario might come up where the advisor, has an option not to act in the best interest of the clients or may face a conflict of interest when delivering their advice. And we will expand on this a little bit later on in the webinar as well. Now, one of the most exciting parts of starting Q3 is that you are finally added to the Financial Advisor Register, or the FAAA. And this register lists all individuals who are authorized and registered to give advice as a financial advisor. And this is publicly available information as well. Now, we thought it was important to mention here that there is a cost from ASIC attached to being added to the register that's charged to the licensees. And different licensees can also have different costs associated with this when adding their PY candidates to the register after they've finished the exam. Now, what this can mean is that you may find that for a smaller licensee, and we have heard of this anecdotally from some of our colleagues, there's been a delay in adding a PY candidate to the register straight after they've passed the exam. And this could be to avoid, paying a cost for a partial financial year. And we just wanted to mention it because we know everyone is kind of raring to go after you've made the jump and passed the exam. And it's just something to be aware of and to even bring it up with your supervisor or your licensee so that you've both got a clear roadmap for your career after the advisor exam is completed and that you're both clear on the timeframes. And lastly, we'd just like to touch on as well the continuing professional development or CPD requirements for your professional year. So currently, there's no legal requirement from ASIC for anyone who's completing the professional year to complete CPD points within the professional year. Once it's finalised and you're on the register as a fully registered financial advisor, you then need to complete legally 40 hours of CPD points per year to retain that registration. And Kira is going to talk about this more in the next slides. But we have found that this requirement can differ based on each licensee. So as an example, at my previous licensee, they required any person who was working as an associate role and above to complete 20 CPD hours per year, even if you weren't on the register yet. So these may vary if you do hear differing things. It's also another good thing to discuss with your licensee when making your professional year plans, just to make sure you can track it and stay on top of it. And now I'll pass on to Kira, who's going to take you through the next few slides as well.
Thanks, Kim. Okay, so a little bit of a attention-grabbing headline on this one. We had a lot of questions in webinar 1, which was hosted by Matt Canizet, about the crossover between the 100 hours of structured learning and 40 hours of CPD. How does that work? Do my 100 hours all have to be CPD points? So we wanted to make an effort to answer those questions today. Do I have to do 140 hours of CPD? The answer to that is no, you definitely don't. During the professional year, the requirement is 100 hours of structured training. This structured training should be made up of education that is measurable, assessed, and leads to further qualification, formal and informal outcomes for participants. Licensees might have a different idea of what that should look like. So for me personally, I did half of my professional year under one licensee and changed partway through to a different licensee. One of those licensees was happy, as an example, for me to use hours, or give an estimate of the hours that I'd spent studying for the advisor exam, for that to be counted as part of my 100 hours of structured training. The advisor exam is obviously a formal assessment, but the other licensee looked at that and went, well, it's not measurable. How can we tell how many hours you've spent studying for that exam? How do we measure that? That's just a number that you're making up. So the other licensee decided no, that wasn't something that they would consider to be part of the 100 hours of structured training. The point of this is just to make sure that people understand that what's required under legislation versus what a licensee might require of you are different, because legislation is open to interpretation sometimes. And if your licensee thinks something that's over and above what the legislation requires, then it's important to make sure that you're complying also with what your licensee requires of you. So in terms of that 100 hours, that's during the professional year period. The 40 hours of CPD kicks in after your PY has been signed off. That's what the legislation states. The Corporations Act is very clear that the CPD provisions don't apply to provisional relevant providers. Some ideas about how we meet these two different requirements of the 100 hours of structured training and the 40 hours of CPD. We've got a list here on the right-hand side. All of the things listed on the right-hand side here are specific things that will achieve CPD points for you. FAAA Learn has some fantastic resources for any FAAA members. Congress and Roadshow are fantastic opportunities to clock up a lot of points in a short period of time. Kaplan On Track is another one that is frequently used by a lot of licensees and professionals. There are special interest courses like SMSF, aged care, or stockbroking, and I'll touch on that again in a moment. Professional designations such as CFP is another thing that those hours spent can count towards CPD points. Product accreditation courses. Often your licensee might have specific courses they ask you to complete. Those points can count. And also then there's CPD webinars run by a myriad of product providers. We've just put a few on a list there that we are familiar with, but plenty of options to get your CPD points up. In terms of the 40 hours, once you've completed your PY, there are 29 hours for most people that are mandatory specific areas. Technical competence at 5 hours, client care and practice, 5 hours, regulatory compliance and consumer protection, 5 hours, the tax financial advice, if that's relevant to you, also 5 hours, and then professionalism and ethics being 9 hours. So that leaves 11 hours that are not mandatory. You can pick up those points in any area. However, coming back to the SMSF and aged care, often there's a requirement from licensees that if you are have a specialisation in those areas, that you'll have an additional requirement to have CPD points each and every year in those specialist areas. Next slide, please. So this is just in here to help people navigate to FAAA Learn. This is the screen that comes up when you log into your FAAA portal. And if you click on resources at the top, that's got the red box around it there, within that, you will also find the PY tool, which I believe has gone live or is going live very shortly. And additionally, if you missed the first 2 webinars, that's where you'll be able to access the recordings of those resources and PY tool. Next slide, please. Okay, so what can you do to make your PY the best it can be? I've included a link here to the legislation which outlines the work activities that are required in each quarter of the PY. Kim already touched on what's required in Q3 and Q4, but I would like to touch again on the part where we say completing work activities, or the legislation says, sorry, completing work activities under the limited or indirect supervision by the supervisor or other relevant providers nominated by the supervisor. What does that mean? I think it means that you know, you're a provisional advisor now. You've passed the exam. You're officially on the financial advisor register. This part of the PY is designed to be about you doing it on your own, but with the right supports. I encourage you not to rush your professional year. There might be moments of frustration in there for you. There certainly were for me. It took me 19, almost 20 months to complete my PY. As I mentioned, it was split between 2 licensees. So that was part of the reason for me why it took a bit longer. But it's really important to make the most of your PY and lean into the opportunities, and don't get signed off until you feel ready. Ensuring that you take the lead in client meetings wherever possible. Practice using your soft skills while you've still got somebody there to pick up the slack. Your supervisor hopefully wants you to continue working in the business and wants you to be successful. The point of the PY is to ensure that everybody gets adequate training, and that we don't have people completing a degree and then going out there without the soft skills and the extra things that we need when we're interacting with clients that can't just be learned from textbooks and in your degree. It shouldn't be a sink or swim situation moving into Q3. It should be about having support, getting in front of clients, having conversations where you've got support. Hopefully by this stage, you know, well and truly past completing your degree, you feel that you've got the technical knowledge and a good level of confidence in your knowledge, but soft skills will only get better by getting in and practicing. So get in and practice as much as you can. And if you're not getting the opportunities to do that, have a clear conversation with your supervisor or other staff in the business you're working with about what you need for your professional year, because we're all individual and the skills that we feel we need to work on will be different as individuals. Make sure also that you actively seek out feedback. If you're in a meeting with your supervisor or another advisor, ask them what you've done well or what you can improve on. Feedback or constructive criticism is a gift. Accept that gift and learn from it. It's the only way that we can improve. Also, ask as many questions as you can. So we're seeking the feedback and we're also asking, well, how would you have dealt with this situation differently? I'm sure your supervisor is going to have a lot of stories about positive and negative things that have happened during their time as an advisor. If you can learn from their experiences, both good and bad, the better the opportunities you have to become a better advisor yourself. And of course, networking. Connect on LinkedIn with as many people as you can. Anybody who's here, Kim and Jacob and I and the other members of the EPC, we'd love to hear from you. Reach out. The financial advice profession and community are a really supportive bunch of people. The members of the EPC in particular, we're passionate about supporting students and helping people make their PY successful. If you've got questions, reach out to us. We want to hear from you. I already mentioned FAAA events. So there's obviously local area events that people can attend, which may or may not have CPD points attached. But the focus of those local events is usually more about the networking. Roadshow, Congress. I'm also presenting or part of a panel session, as is Jacob, at Congress in Brisbane this year, which we're very much looking forward to. Excellent opportunity to talk to people, especially other people who are really passionate about this profession that we're in. There's a lot of advisors, not just us here today, a lot of advisors who want to support students and others to have a successful career in financial advice. So connect with as many people as you can. Next slide, please. Over to you, Kim.
All right. Thanks, Kira. We also wanted to cover in this presentation probably the second best part after finishing your advisor exam, which is finishing the PY. Less admin burden, that's for sure. And transitioning from a provisional advisor to a fully qualified financial advisor. And this is because sometimes just finalizing the professional year doesn't mean you will immediately transfer to becoming a titled financial advisor within your firm, because in some cases, you might stay in your current role title until an opportunity does come up. And that's why we put the slide together. And basically, we just wanted to cover off some tips and tools that will help you pitch yourself as a financial advisor to your firm when you do get to that point. And ideally, you would be starting to think about this and putting together a roadmap, so to speak, prior to completing the professional year. And it can even start before you commence the professional year. So you have a really clear track in mind. Why we think this is a really important step is not only does it help show initiative, but when you share it with your supervisor or licensee, it can also ensure that you're all on the same page when it comes to your career development. Anecdotally, we found that transitioning from a provisional advisor to the financial advisor job role usually requires three things that need to occur and that is important for you to be aware of. So the first part of that is individual readiness. And this one is, I guess, on you. So you need to be ready, confident, and willing to make the jump into the financial advisor role. And that's only something that you're going to know when you're ready and when the time is right. And it's really important because although you might meet that criteria on paper, you've passed the exam, you've got your degree, you're provisionally registered, you still might feel that you do need a little bit of extra time or support in the role that you're currently in, whether it be paraplanning, client services, or in an associate or provisional advisor role, before you feel like you're ready to make the jump and go out on your own, which is totally fine and definitely encouraged. And when you're ready to make the transition, then it can be time to approach a supervisor and let them know that you feel that you have met that individual readiness. Which leads us to the second part, which is the supervisor readiness. So your supervisor and hopefully your mentor is going to be the best place to ascertain whether you're ready or not to begin servicing a client base. And they should be comfortable with it, and there should be that ongoing discussion. And if there are any qualms along the way, it's making sure that you discuss it with them, like Kira said, seeking feedback and aiming for that continuous improvement and just showing that willingness to develop. And once the supervisor is then comfortable with you being able to service the client base without supervision, that brings us to the third part, which is where a business opportunity has to exist, which might seem like an unusual point to make, but because you've done all the work and you've passed the exam and you're ticking all the boxes, you're ready to go. But it is a really vital part and an important discussion point with your supervisor or the licensee prior or during the professional year to really map out where that business opportunity is going to exist for you to fill that financial advisor role. Is it going to be there's potential for you to build your own client base, or are you going to help service an existing book of clients? Because it's not going to make sense for, I guess, the licensee to put somebody through a professional year if the business opportunity doesn't exist at the end of it. So it's really important that you're all aware of it and all on the same page when you are developing this roadmap to becoming a financial advisor. And I also just quickly wanted to mention a tool that can help you showcase your value to the firm, which is a business case. Now, a business case, it not only highlights your value add and shows initiative, it can really help you make that transition to becoming a full financial advisor. You can use the business case to highlight tangible and realistic goals that you can help your firm achieve. You can help highlight market opportunities that you've identified that exist within your community, your demographic, or the wider Australian landscape for financial planners. And you can use it to show how your skills and experiences are an integral part of the firm's strategy to gain that market share. Now, small firms that are really under the pump are really going to appreciate this research, as likely they probably don't have time to consider it themselves. And although it might sound really daunting, there are so many templates and research tools out there to help you. And when in doubt, or if in doubt, you can always chat GPT it. And so I'll pass on to Kira now for the next couple of slides.
Thanks, Kim. Okay, so somewhat back on CPD again, but I wanted to take the opportunity to promote becoming a certified financial planner. The course to do that is via the FAAA here in Australia. CFP is recognised in 27 territories around the world. This is a worldwide designation, not just here in Australia. CFP encourages applied learning. So it's quite different to the degree that you might already have completed. It's all about case studies and applying those technical skills that you've learnt and all of the book knowledge, applying that to real client situations. And it will extend you above and beyond what you would have learnt in your degree. Completing CFP is very flexible. It's available online and on demand. It helps demonstrate you're amongst the best in the profession. And if you have completed an approved postgraduate financial planning degree, you'll get RPLs for modules that you've already completed, recognition of prior learning, and you'll be able to enter directly into the certification unit, which is what I have done. All other approved degree holders would need to complete CFP 1 through 4. So there are 5 units in total. CFP 1 being FAAA professionalism, 2 is applied strategies, 3 is also an applied strategies subject, 4 is investment strategies, and then the capstone unit, certification unit, requires you to complete a real-life case study-based assignment, writing an advice document, complete an exam, and there's also an experience component to that, which has to be supervised. So these are good options for you to look at getting additional CPD points once you're qualified, or potentially even during your professional year if you felt ready to do so. The last point that we've got on the slide here is that CFP can be done as part of an integrated master's program with Kaplan Professional or with Griffith University. So, you know, master's subjects that might include things such as an SMSF specialist course, an aged care specialist course, which are also things we touched on earlier. You can do those as part of a master's program as electives, and it kind of kills two birds with one stone, I guess. You get the master's and you get a CFP designation at the end. To answer your question, Birchall, correct, none of this is required to work as an advisor. This is just an add-on that we wanted to discuss today for additional learning opportunities. We have the 40 hours of CPD requirements each year. As an advisor, you can't ever stop learning. Legislation is changing constantly. We've got to keep on top of it. And this is a way for you to do that. And clients will recognize if you have those CFP letters after your name, it's internationally recognized, and it is a value add or potential perception by the client that you've gone above and beyond with the level of your qualifications. Understand that clients don't necessarily ask for it. I'm just trying to point out that they're, you know, it's internationally recognised as a designation. The other point I wanted to mention was that there are, if you are an FAAA member, and student membership, as Kim mentioned, is free. There's also discounted course fees with a number of educational institutions, Kaplan Professional and Griffith Uni being two of those. There's a list on the website if you wanted to go and look that up to get some more information if you were interested in any of those courses. Next slide, please. All right, important contact details here. So if you've got professional year specific inquiries, there's an email address for that. If you're not in your PY yet, if you're still a student, but you've got questions about that, there's an email address on the screen for that. You'll be able to access this recording and a copy of the slides after this webinar. You can also find us on social media. So please come and find the FAAA Students page on Facebook, on LinkedIn. I believe there is also an Instagram page, but personally, I'm a bit old to be on Insta too often. I'm much more on the Facebook side of things. And the QR code you can see on the screen there is for you to join FAAA if you are not already a member. And I wanted to take the opportunity to remind any people who have been student members to make sure you renew your membership if you haven't done so already. TikTok. I am personally on TikTok. You can come find me if you want to hear about some financial education. So I don't think FAAA is on TikTok though. Okay, over to you, Kim.
Thanks, Kira. So now we've got time for some Q&A after all that information, and I might start at the moment, and I might go to Jacob and just ask, how did your mindset change after you passed the financial exam, you got added to the register, and you were able to kickstart Q3?
Yeah, thanks for that, Kim. Firstly, it was a big relief passing the exam and getting the results. The results took about 4 to 5 weeks to come. So in the days leading up to it, I was definitely refreshing my emails and a little bit nervous, but yeah, massive relief to pass. And even a big part in that was obviously the transition from Q1 to Q2 and then going into Q3. My employer's been really good with giving me a lot of exposure in the first two quarters. So that transition to Q3 and being a lot more independent now and exposure to clients, it was a lot more seamless than what I thought. There is, it does get a bit nerve-wracking when you're the only advisor in the room speaking to clients. But you just have to remind yourself that, you're probably the only person in the room that has the most knowledge around these certain topics. And you have put in a lot of work to get to where you are today. And like we previously mentioned, it is a big thing around the soft skills. So if your supervisor has given you exposure to those clients from, Q1 and Q2, you can easily transition into Q3 and get in front of clients and be a lot more confident. So definitely being a lot more business minded in the Q3 has been a big change in my mindset, and having to grow a book myself, and obviously be in front of clients one-on-one. Yeah.
Awesome. Did you have any tips that you wanted to share about how you've gone about growing your book, or how you're going to start, I guess, getting out there to build your own client base for anyone on the call?
Yeah. So obviously networking's a massive thing, and having someone, an employer and supervisor, encouraging you to get out and meet other people also is a massive thing that you should be looking at before you go and start working somewhere. They're questions that I would be asking the future employer before I started this role as well. That was one thing that I really wanted to make sure. But definitely networking, so getting out there, going to FAAA events like we previously mentioned, going and meeting with accountants, mortgage brokers, and building a rapport with them, because at the end of the day, a lot of referrals do come from mortgage brokers and accountants. And then the other thing is your clients. Your clients, one of your biggest assets. The word of mouth, it's a big thing in the financial planning industry. So, every time you're seeing a client, it's an opportunity to present yourself to them, and hopefully they, by the work that you're doing, spread that to their friends, and then they come back, and it's a great way to build the book naturally and organically. And also what I've been doing is getting clients to leave reviews as well online. Probably not the clients that I meet the first time, but the clients that you have a good relationship with. That's probably something else that can help to build some online presence.
Awesome. Thank you. Kira, did you want to add anything to that in your role as a financial advisor now that you've been in the industry for a while?
Yeah, thanks, Kim. It's look, finishing your PY is obviously a shift in mindset. And the purpose of the PY is to try and do that gradually. So, you become registered as a provisional advisor when you move into Q3. When you get to the end of Q4, that's when you are flying solo, so to speak. Practicing soft skills as much as you can along the way, but obviously you're not going to be perfect, amazing advisor on day one. It's still a learning curve. There will be times where you have to put in some extra hours because you're not able to keep on top of your workload in the way that you expected. Now that the buck stops with you, moving from, a provisional or more of an associate role where you're supporting another advisor into doing all of it yourself, coming up with the full plan for the strategy of what you want the advice to be, and liaising with an associate or paraplanners to get that advice done. It can be a lot. So just lean into it. If it takes longer than you think it should, that's okay. It's a learning curve. Be kind to yourself.
That's awesome. Thank you. And we just had a question as well come through the chat for you, Kira. Just a question on obtaining the CFP designation. Do you think it would be more beneficial to wait until you've had more experience working as an advisor before embarking on the additional qualification?
Yeah, great question, Jessie. So for me, as I mentioned, I've had a lot of years of experience already, a lot of years sitting in associate and paraplanning roles. So for me, it felt like the next natural choice. And I also was able to take advantage of some scholarships that were available. So that was part of my decision to start moving into CFP sooner rather than later, was those scholarship opportunities. Having the on-the-job skills, which I got through many years of being an associate and a paraplanner, definitely helped with completing that CFP study. And I wouldn't say to necessarily jump into it as soon as you've finished your degree. So yeah, good to have some more experience working before jumping into that qualification.
Awesome, thank you. And I think we touched on it earlier in the webinar as well when we were mentioning some of the ethical dilemmas. Wondering if you and Jacob could expand on whether on some examples that you might have used for Q3 and Q4 or that you've come across in your role so far. Maybe start with you, Jacob.
Yeah. One big thing is obviously when you're getting out there and you're meeting with new people, accountants, mortgage brokers, and trying to build referral networks. I've had a few times brokers ask me for referral fees or for payments to refer clients. And that was something that was new to me because I'd never experienced something like that. They obviously come from a different industry and they're looking out for their pocket as well. But it allowed me to think, is this something that is right or something I should do? And it's definitely not the right thing to do. So it was about questioning my own integrity in that moment and saying, if I do refer a client to this broker and get a payment from that, is that going to affect my mindset going forward? And will I just start referring to the one broker? Or, is this the right thing to do at the end of the day, which it isn't. So that was probably one thing that I've experienced so far from networking with other professionals. And it is something to be careful of as well.
I think that's a really good point, Jacob, because those types of referral fees have been very common in the past, but the Code of Ethics now tells us, it's very clear that we shouldn't be, I can't remember the wording off the top of my head, but anything where there might be even a perceived conflict, we should not act. So taking referral fees is a pretty big no-no these days. So that's really good to raise as an ethical dilemma and the questions that come up because of that. An example that I had was a particular client that just didn't get along with. We would have conversations and I could just tell that we weren't ever going to see eye to eye. Thankfully, that was me in an associate role and that person wasn't going to become my client. But there's often situations like that where you need to take a step back and go, is this because of something I like or dislike about a person? Is this a personality clash? Lots of things like that where it could be perceived to be a conflict or some sort of ethical issue where you might not be the best person to be dealing with that particular client, and being aware of that and actively making a choice around things like that, I think, is really important.
Awesome, thank you. And another, I think, subtle ethical dilemma, it's kind of along the lines of what Jacob was saying is when you're providing product recommendation to clients, the exposure that you have to funds, is it a fund that always comes around and is entertaining and catering, and they might be taking, you know, you to events and long lunches? Is that why you're recommending the product? Is it actually in the best interest of the clients to be put in that product, or are you doing it because you've, you know, buddy with the business development managers? That's something also to consider when you're providing advice. That could be an ethical dilemma. And we've just had another question come through from Gemma. Thank you. This is a really good question as well. So it's about job titles, the variation in job titles, which is, she's mentioned associate versus associate advisor. And as a degree graduate who wants to start the professional year straight away, what type of job title should Gemma be looking for, associate or associate advisor? Especially if the job description doesn't state that the PY applicants are welcome. I can touch on that and say that there's lots of variations in the job roles. There's no consistency. A lot of the time, it can be really hard to identify, I guess, what job role is going to suit you at the stage of your career that you're in. And I always recommend having an open discussion with a recruiter or with their potential employer, just to let them know where you're at, you're wanting to jump in, because they might not have capacity to take you on in that role. But is there a time frame that you would like to complete it in? Because they might say, we need you for 6 months to do this, and then you can jump in. But again, reiterating what Kira said, there shouldn't be a rush with the professional year. And it's easy to say in hindsight, because I was super keen to jump in and get the ball rolling as kind of a mature age entry into the industry. But going from the technical learning in university to the soft skills and all the facets of people's different, you know, personal situations was a huge jump. And I was grateful to have a little bit of a break in an associate role before I then commenced my PY. Kira, I don't know, or Jacob, if you want to add to that as well.
I agree with what you've said, Kim. I think that the specifically associate versus associate advisor, the roles will look different in different businesses, but really there's probably no difference between those two things. Most likely it has been a licensee decision that they don't want to call anybody, don't want to have the word advisor in the job title until somebody is actually qualified. There's some wording in legislation that says that you shouldn't have that in your job title unless you're actually an advisor. So certainly a business that I worked for in the past made that change. People were called associate advisors, and then suddenly they were just called associates because they didn't want any perception that this person is qualified to give advice when they are not yet. So I would say apply for both. And I would also like to add that there's the FAAA careers page, which if you're not familiar with that, go and check it out. Hopefully it's only been in use, I think, for maybe 12 or 18 months, but hopefully more businesses are becoming aware of it and will be listing job ads on that site. The other suggestion is to, if you're researching potential places that you'd like to work, to have a look on the advisor register or on the FAAA Find a Planner. Search for that business, see if you can find some extra information, do some research on them, see if you think that's the type of place that you want to work. Have a look at their website. Does the way that website presents align with your personal values? Because I think a big part of you being successful in a role is whether or not your personal values and the type of culture of that business, whether those things are aligned.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Kira, as well. I'll just follow up and say that speaking to the employer, also getting an understanding of if other people have gone through their PY there, asking questions around, you know, what are some of the learning and structured training that you put your professional year candidates through, just trying to get as much information off them as possible, because the last thing you want to be doing is jumping from job to job because they haven't, taken you through your PY or you're not learning enough. So it's really crucial to be asking those questions in the interview process and doing that research beforehand just to gain as much information as possible.
Definitely, that's a great tip. And LinkedIn, again, is another great place to get your name out there, connect with people in the industry. We're having a conversation the other day just saying sometimes if somebody is familiar with you on LinkedIn, just that name recognition can put you at the top of a job pool where 200 candidates have applied for it, and can just take you that next step further. And we've just had another question from Kylie come through about the 1,600 hours requirement for the PY, because she's gone from 100% work from home to 100% working in the office, which is a struggle to juggle. And there's no stipulation on whether the 1,500 hours needs to be completed at home or in the office. It's more the activities that you're undertaking as part of that need to be classified as those work-related activities, or the specific activities that you need as part of the Q3, Q4, or Q1 and Q2 if you're still in those ones as well. So they don't need to be completed in the office. They can be completed work from home. Just seeing if there's any other questions that have come
also
through.
To touch on that, and getting into the office, I would highly recommend new entrants and people that are starting to try and get into the office as much as they can. It's really good to get around advisors, especially if the place you're working for has multiple advisors in the practice. It's hard to build that connection and learn when you're at home. So if you have opportunities to get into the office and get in meetings with advisors, I would definitely do that. I've been in the office 5 days a week since starting here, and I would recommend it highly. I know the flexibility is great, but the flexibility will come once you have the knowledge and the clients. So yeah, I've really pushed myself to get into the office as much as possible, and ask the advisors questions and get into meetings with them as well.
Yep, that's a great point.
There's a question here about, sorry, Kim, there's a question about tips for younger or new advisors to alleviate client concerns about perceived lack of experience. I'll ask you guys that question as well, but on that point, I would like to say these questions, for some reason, are so common in financial advice, but do we ask those questions of recently qualified lawyers? Do we ask those questions of recently qualified accountants or doctors? No, we assume that those people are qualified to do their job. So I think that, yes, they have a lack of experience, but they have the skills and knowledge. It's just about practicing the soft skills. And I can't stress that enough. That's the purpose of the PY. So you've completed your degree, you've got a job in the profession, lean into practicing your soft skills. That's how you get through it. And I think that comment about taking advice from a 20-something, that's certainly something that I perceived in the past. It was part of what held me back from becoming an advisor, because for me, as a 20-something working with largely retirees in previous roles, that felt really strange to me. I would sit in meetings with clients and I would think, why would they listen to me? I'm sitting here as a 20-something-year-old person, and they've got all of these years of life experience, and they're going to know so much more about so many things than I do. The likelihood is that you still know so much more than them about the thing that you are qualified to do. So don't let that scare you off.
That's
Anything
really well
you guys
said,
like to add?
That's really well said. Thank you. And also on the other end, you can have an older advisor who is stuck in their ways, and they're not embracing technology, and you can miss out on a whole bunch of stuff through that. So it's not an age thing. It's because there are issues that are everyone at either end of the spectrum. But yeah, that's great. And Matt said in the chat as well, everyone does need to start somewhere, and then you build from there, and that's awesome. Were there any other questions that anyone? I'm just going back through the chat to see if we've missed anything, or that anybody wanted to add. Kira or Jacob, any tips? Even I guess managing your time as a new advisor, something that I struggled with in Q3 with all the different kind of tasks and activities, staying on top of it. If you've got any tips to do that.
I'll do something quickly and say, it's actually something that I picked up at Congress last year. A little bit of a plug for Congress, sorry. Managing my tasks, I've been trying to focus at one thing at a time. In the past and before Congress last year, I'd have all my screens going and replying to emails or doing tasks at the same time. So now I am deliberately.
Sorry, Jacob. I'm not sure what's happening, but there's some echoing going on.
Is that better?
A little bit echoey still. Sorry, Jacob.
No. How's that?
No, just a bit of feedback coming through. I don't know what's happened.
Okay. Not sure.
Maybe Kira, do you want to share just some quick tips before we wrap up, and then you can close out the session? We're nearly at time.
I missed the question because I was reading the chat. Could you repeat the question?
Just if you've got any quick time management tips for new advisors before we wrap up.
Yeah, okay. I think time blocking is something that I find works really well for me. Setting aside time for specific tasks. I know that sounds really basic, but it works for me. Emails, just focus on that for a certain part of your morning. Focus on meetings. Try to get as much as you can done from that meeting immediately afterwards. As a new advisor, I think it's important to block that time out post-meeting to ensure that you can do that while it's all still fresh in your mind. And also blocking out time for those networking opportunities and making sure that you can do as much as you can to make yourself the best advisor you can be. Don't just let your calendar get fully booked up with client meetings. You need to have time for other things as well. And I guess unless anybody else has any other questions, we can probably wrap up the session. Thank you, everybody, for your time. Thanks for joining us today. Again, encourage you to renew your membership or join the FAAA if you are not already a member. Some great resources there on the FAAA website. And hopefully the Emerging Professionals Committee will continue to be able to support students and new professionals in this space. Please reach out to us directly if there's anything that we can do to help support you. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.